Hi there. Genshin has been out for a long time, and over time we have seen a number of players join, leave, and then join again, myself included. To those of you who are new to the game, a lot of you might not know about things that have gone on in the game's past, which is what a lot of my channel is dedicated to. That all being said, I've talked about my problems with Sumeru as a region for introducing the Dendro mechanic, but that in and of itself is a combat mechanic. I've never really talked about Sumeru as a whole. The story, the region, the exploration, the new mechanics, and all of the new areas it added. And of all of the areas in the game, there is a particular reason why I'm choosing Sumeru. If you have known people that played the game for a very long time, there's a high likelihood that a lot of the people that used to play the game ended up quitting during the region of Sumeru. The opinions may vary, but in my opinion, my humble opinion, it is the worst region in the game. And it's not because the story is egregiously bad, or the characters are bad. It has a lot to do with the art of repetition. In recent years, Genshin's new gameplay is entirely based around making sure things don't grow stale. Even though the new mechanics can be very annoying, they're still new, and there's something that can shift up the core gameplay loop. The same thing cannot be said for the region of the Dendro Archon, which ended up being one of the highest points of players quitting in the whole game. Which is interesting, because Sumeru ended up starting off strong with the release of the new Dendro element and the Dendro reactions, the first time we ever got something new in the elemental field since release. Needless to say, because we were in the region of grass, Dendro dominated the meta for a very long time, with its new overpowered reactions that I made a video about you can look at here, so I'm not going to go into that many details on it now. Because of the new element, and because of the stranglehold it had on the meta, a lot of characters that released around this era, or all of the major characters at least, were entirely focused around dealing some sort of Dendro reaction. Tighnari exists to be an aggravate character, the main Traveler character exists to be a Dendro applicator, Nilou exists to be a Bloom character, Cyno exists to be a Hyper Bloom character, Nahida is the main driver of the element, Dea was supposed to be good at Burgeon, a lot of good that did, and then of course Alhaitham is the driver for all of the best Hyper Bloom team comp. And then of course there's some standouts like Baiju, who existed to be a support for the element in general. Obviously there were a couple of characters that released during this time that did not entirely work around the Dendro element. For example, Wanderer is a major character that released after a really long wait who ended up being Animo, but again, these were very few and far between. Dendro as a whole was cool at first, but as time goes on and we are getting characters to buff the same three teams, it ends up getting stale. Hurt especially so because the exploration within the region wanted you to have some sort of Dendro team. You were basically always required to have a Hydro character, a Pyro character, an Electro character, and a Dendro character. And because all of these new units wanted fungal spores, you had to only use your Hydro and Dendro characters while fighting enemies that were resistant to Dendro, like the mushrooms and the spores. Speaking of exploration, a lot of Sumeru's exploration can be titled as tedious and repetitive. The major exploration of the first region of Sumeru was entirely locked behind the Aranara quest, a very infamous 20+ quest chain long event that requires the player to spend an exorbitant amount of time exploring caves and uncovering most of Sumeru. If you wanted to get 100% in the region, you had to do this, otherwise it was impossible to do anything past roughly the 50% mark. Not to mention, a lot of the chests in the first area of Sumeru were underground, which gave a lot of players, including myself, a very poor first impression as we logged in and saw things where, oh well, I really would like to have been able to explore this region, but it looks like all the chests are currently not here, and then we made videos complaining about it. And who could forget collecting the 111 Aranaras scattered around the first major region. I did it. I'm not going to do it again, but I did it. But for as much hate as we give the first region of Sumeru, we must admit that it was more unique than the rest of the region, because like I said, Sumeru is the region of repetition, and every other subsequential area for exploration was entirely based around the desert. Whippy. Garrett Bobby Ferguson spent 30 hours texturing that sand model, and we're going to use it. The release of the first desert was interesting, I guess. A lot of the chests, once again, could not be explored on the main map. They had to be found in underground tunnels and caves that were only accessible by doing yet another very long quest. And while the quest with Jet wasn't anywhere near as long as the quest with the Aranara, it was still a 9-hour long quest that was required for you to 100% the new region. Players complained, but once again, we still did it. Assuming the next region was going to be a little bit different for the sake of our own sanity, we were wrong. The next region was another desert. Matter of fact, this region also continued the trend with Jet, where we had to go on another exploration quest through the desert in order to find out the secret of their lost city. Yay! Did I mention this quest is also 10 hours long? And unlike last time, where your reward for completing it was getting to explore a new area, you got to explore more desert with more annoying mechanics. But it's okay. Surely, the region based around Dendro, the core of life itself, will not release. The next area was a desert. But hold on, guys. This one had a little oasis in the middle of it. That's what we wanted, right? And can you guess what was also in this region? That's right, another really long 10-hour quest chain that was required for you to get 100% exploration. Are you starting to see the problem here? Sumeru started off as a region that a lot of players were looking forward to due to the new element it introduced and the new theme of life. Yeah, sure, we had forest before in the game, but nothing like what we expected when we think of rainforest jungle region. And a lot of players were really excited for that, and we just didn't get it. Sure, there's a lot of lore reasons for why the desert is the way it is, being ruled by the King Deshert, but that doesn't really excuse the fact that the main gameplay was repetitive and boring. And a lot like with the first area of Sumeru, you basically had to have Dendro, Electro, Pyro, and Hydro on hand at all time in order to do most of the puzzles that were involved with the region. It made it so that a lot of team diversity was essentially dead, and you had to use whatever characters were relevant at the time for that exploration mission, which also plays in part to the Spiral Abyss. I know I said I wasn't going to talk about meta, but it's relevant. Because Dendro was super hardcore in the meta and every character was releasing to be some sort of Dendro support, the Spiral Abyss followed in suit like it usually does, tailor-making itself for some sort of new, on-banner character to succeed there expeditiously. As a result, the gameplay was very repetitive. You would log into the new region, pull the new Dendro-based supporting character, go play the same new desert area that is just a slight change of pace with a new, really long, annoying quest that you don't want to do, and then when you're done, you can go play the Spiral Abyss for 30 minutes and do the same Dendro teams you've been using and building upon for the past year. There is a reason why a lot of people that played Genshin during this era quit, including myself. It just got boring. A lot of people complain today that the meta is entirely revolved around Neuvillette and how powerful he is, but I feel like a lot of people don't realize that Neuvillette is just one team archetype, and there are other teams that are, well, there's nothing that's as good as Neuvillette, but there are other teams that can compete. In the region of Sumeru, this was your only option. Use Dendro, succeed, or don't succeed, especially because the Spiral Abyss ended up spiking its health pool as a result. Player sentiment was at an all-time low by this time anyway, especially because there were a lot of controversies that revolved around Sumeru. A lot of these I won't comment on, because in my opinion, the Genshin community is not mature enough to talk about anything really outside of the scope of the game, if I'm being honest. And I'm going to be honest, as boring and as repetitive as Sumeru is, I feel like MiHoYo intentionally did this. See, MiHoYo is a massive company, and they really like their property that revolves around Honkai Impact, and it just so happened that in the middle of Sumeru's introduction, they were releasing a new game, Honkai Impact 3rd, which released in mid-April of 2023, smack dab in the middle of Sumeru's release date. I feel like a lot of resources were going into Honkai Impact Star Rail, or Honkai Star Rail, at this time. So a lot of the resources that should have been going into Genshin quite simply weren't, which resulted in a lot of repetitive reuse of models, story archetypes, tropes, and really boring gameplay. By the time Star Rail came out and was able to stand on its own feet financially, MiHoYo ended up recovering and releasing Fontaine not long after. And before that, we even got the Summer Island with the little waterfalls, which I don't remember much about it. I remember there being some oceanids, but I do remember enjoying it as a whole. Basically, all that to say is, as much as you might not like the new regions, as much as you might not like Fontaine, just remember that it could be significantly worse. We could be in Sumeru again, where all of our content is revolving around the same two types of areas, the same type of really long 9-hour quest that does all the exploration for you, and the same 3 team comps with minor improvements over the entire duration of the region. Sure, it's kind of annoying that a lot of Natlan characters don't work without Natlan characters, but I will take that any day over a whole archetype of character puts a stranglehold on the meta for years. You need to remember this was an era where Alhaitham Hyperbloom was so powerful it was a joke, making fun of bosses and their mechanics because, hey bro, that's a really neat mechanic you got there. Too bad I'll never see it because I'm using my awesome Alhaitham Hyperbloom team comp. But yeah, with that all being said, sure some of you will disagree with me, some of you will agree with me. Let me know in the comments down below. Like, comment, subscribe. See ya.